Have you ever sat alone in a quiet room and wondered, did I make the right choice? I asked myself that question often after moving into a nursing home. At 82, I thought I understood what I was signing up for: comfort, support, peace of mind for my family. They told me it would be easier, safer, even better for me in the long run. And at the time, I believed them. But once the doors closed behind me, I started to see a different reality, one I wasn't prepared for. If you're at the stage in life where this decision is on the table, whether for yourself or someone you love, I invite you to walk with me through the truths I've learned the hard way. Not to scare you, but to give you the clarity I wish I had. Because there are things no brochure or well-meaning conversation will ever fully explain. In this video, I'll share 6 eye-opening lessons from inside truths that may help you make a decision with both eyes open and heart intact. Take a moment, get comfortable, and stay with me. This might be exactly what you need to hear before taking that next step. Regret 1. Losing my independence. I never imagined how deeply I would feel the absence of freedom until it was gone. When I first moved into the nursing home, I thought I was just trading in some space and convenience for safety and care. But what I hadn't prepared for was the quiet, creeping realization that I was no longer in charge of my own life. Before, I lived on my own terms. I woke up when I felt ready, brewed my coffee just the way I liked it, wandered outside when the air felt right, and read for hours in my favorite chair without anyone interrupting me. Those small, seemingly ordinary decisions stitched together the fabric of who I was. They were my rhythm, my comfort, my identity. But here, inside the nursing home, that rhythm changed. Everything waking up, meals, bathing, even bedtime was suddenly dictated by someone else's schedule. Breakfast was served whether I was hungry or not. Lights were turned off, whether I was ready to sleep or still lost in thought. If I wanted to take a walk, it wasn't just a matter of standing up and going anymore. I had to ask, wait, in hope someone had time to take me. Even choosing what to wear or when to shower began to feel less like a choice and more like a privilege that had to be earned or approved. I remember my first week like it was yesterday. I woke up early, like I always had, and reached for the book I'd been reading back home. But it wasn't there. Neither was my chair, the familiar scent of my kitchen, or the gentle hum of my radio. The room was clean and well kept, but it wasn't mine. And in that still morning silence, I felt something heavy settle in my chest, the weight of knowing I had stepped into a life where my decisions were no longer entirely my own. What made it harder was how quickly I began to adapt. Not because I wanted to, but because resistance takes energy and energy runs low when your world feels smaller. I stopped asking if I could go outside, because waiting felt worse than staying in. I stopped complaining about meals, even when I didn't like them. Little by little, I gave in to the system around me. It wasn't cruel or cold, it just wasn't mine. And in the process, something inside me dimmed. I became quieter, more agreeable, less me. If you're thinking about a nursing home, I won't tell you not to go. Every situation is different, but I will say this from the bottom of my heart: be honest with yourself about what matters most to you. Because it's not just the big things you might lose, it's the little freedoms that shape the feeling of home. And once those are gone, you'll realize just how sacred they truly were. Independence isn't just about doing everything on your own. It's about having the choice, the dignity, to live life on your terms. And when that choice is no longer yours, it leaves a silence that's hard to fill. Regret 2. Feeling forgotten. No one prepares you for the quiet, not the peaceful kind you enjoy with a cup of tea and a good book, but the kind that lingers in the corners of a room when the laughter has faded, the visitors have gone, and the days start to blend together. When I first moved into the nursing home, my family wrapped me in warmth and reassurance. "We'll visit all the time," my daughter said with a soft smile. And for a while, she did. She came every week, bringing flowers or stories about her work. My grandchildren would tag along on weekends, full of energy and hugs. For those first few weeks, it felt like I was still part of their world, still remembered, still needed. But time, as it does, began to shift things. The visits that once came like clockwork started arriving late or not at all. My daughter called instead of coming, "Just for today, Mom, things have been hectic." I understood. Of course I did. Life doesn't stop just because mine has slowed down. My grandchildren got busy with school, sports, their own growing lives, holidays, once marked by full tables and laughter, became the loneliest days of all. I would wait in my nicest sweater, hair brushed, heart hopeful, and then I'd hear that familiar excuse, something came up. The staff would try to comfort me, maybe next weekend. They'd say, but some weekends never come. It's not that my family stopped loving me. I truly believe they still do. But when you're no longer visible in someone's everyday life, you begin to fade from their attention. They assume you're doing fine. They imagine you've settled in. But inside, there's still a longing, a deep, quiet ache for connection. The truth is, being in a nursing home doesn't erase your need for love, for conversation, for simply being seen. I remember one night in particular. I sat in my room with my phone in hand, my thumb hovering over my son's name. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. I stared at that screen, debating whether to call, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to sound needy. I didn't want to be one more thing on his already full plate. So I put the phone down and stared out the window, realizing that hoping someone remembers you isn't the same as being remembered. If you're considering this path for yourself or someone you love, I urge you to think beyond the facility tours and safety features. Ask yourself, am I ready for the possibility of being quietly left behind? Not out of cruelty, but out of life simply moving on. Because in here, surrounded by others who know this feeling all too well, I've learned that being forgotten doesn't happen all at once. It happens little by little. And once it does, it's hard to feel whole again. Still, even in this quiet, I remind myself of one thing every day: my story isn't over. I may not be in the center of their lives anymore, but I am still here, still loving, still hoping, and sometimes, just sometimes, that hope brings them back to me. Regret 3, losing my sense of purpose. I used to think that moving into a nursing home was simply about changing where I lived. A new address, a safer environment, a little help with daily routines, that's all I expected. But what I didn't realize was that I wasn't just giving up a home. I was giving up the quiet, everyday reasons that made life feel meaningful. Back home, I had things to do and people to care for. I watered my plants every morning, brewed my own coffee just the way I liked it, and took pride in keeping my space tidy and personal. These little acts may have seemed ordinary, but to me, they were pieces of a life with rhythm, with purpose. Once I moved in here, those rhythms faded. Meals were served at fixed times, already prepared by someone else. My laundry, my room, even the little messes I used to clean without thinking, now taken care of by well-meaning staff. At first, I convinced myself it was a relief. No more chores. I said, I've earned this rest, but the truth settled in slowly, like a fog. Without those daily tasks, my days began to blur together. I found myself sitting longer, thinking less, feeling emptier, and I wasn't alone. One man I grew close to, George, was 84 and had been a carpenter all his life. His hands, once calloused and precise, were now idle. At home, he was always fixing things, sanding down wood, building shelves or little toys for his grandkids. But here, no tools, no projects, nothing to shape, nothing to mend. I remember the day he turned to me and said, I feel useless. His voice was quiet, but the pain behind it was sharp. I nodded, because I understood deeply. You see, when you no longer have something to nurture, something to plan or look forward to, it does something to your spirit. You don't just feel bored, you feel erased. The body slows. Yes, but what's worse is when the heart and mind start to slow too. And before long, you find yourself merely existing, waiting for the next meal, the next round of pills, the next day to come and go. But purpose isn't something that disappears just because we age. It may change form. It may no longer look like a job or a household to manage, but the need to feel needed, to contribute, to matter, never leaves us. It's still there, quiet and persistent, like an ember waiting for breath. If you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, I urge you to ask yourself what brings your days, meaning what keeps you grounded. Because once you step into a place where much is done for you, you'll need to fight a little harder to keep those sparks alive. And trust me, it's worth fighting for. Having something to care about, even something small, can remind you that you're not just passing time. You're still living, still becoming, still you. Regret 4, declining health faster than expected. Before I moved into the nursing home, I was doing surprisingly well for someone my age. I wasn't climbing mountains, but I could still care for myself with confidence. My days were simple, but full morning stretches by the window, slow walks to the market, preparing my meals with care, and tidying up just enough to keep me moving. Those little daily efforts kept my body alive in ways I never truly appreciated. But once I settled into the nursing home, something shifted. At first, it felt like a well-earned break. Meals were brought to me hot and ready. No more standing in the kitchen or cleaning up afterward. If I needed anything, I just pressed a button and someone kind would appear with a smile. It felt easy, too easy. What I didn't realize then was how quickly easy can turn into idle. I stopped standing as much. I stopped walking as often. Days would pass where I hardly moved more than from my bed to my chair. At first, I thought I was just enjoying the rest, but then my legs started to stiffen. Getting out of a chair, something I never gave a second thought, began to feel like lifting a mountain. The muscles I'd spent years maintaining seemed to melt away in a matter of weeks. And I wasn't the only one. I watched it happen all around me. Residents who had walked in on their own 2 feet slowly began using walkers, then wheelchairs. Independence faded, not because of a single event, but because of quiet, daily inaction. I remember Alice, a bright and determined 81-year-old who came in with a bounce in her step. "I'm not slowing down just because I'm in here," she used to say, walking laps around the hallway each morning. But months passed, and I saw her walking less. Then came the walker, then the wheelchair. One afternoon, she looked at me with teary eyes and whispered, "I don't know when it happened, but I feel like I aged 10 years in 3 months." And in that moment, I knew exactly how she felt. The truth is, our bodies are like candles. They burn steadily when tended to, but fade fast when left untouched. In a place designed to make life easier, it's frighteningly easy to forget that movement is not just optional, it's necessary. It's what keeps the heart strong, the joints working, and the mind awake. No one told me how quickly I'd lose strength when I stopped reaching, bending, walking. If I could do it again, I'd fight harder to stay active. I'd walk every hallway. I'd stretch each morning, even when I didn't feel like it. I'd take the long way to the dining room, not just for exercise, but as an act of self-preservation. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself this: when everything is set up to make life effortless, will you still find the will to keep your body moving? Because once you slow down, not just for a day, but for weeks on end, getting back up is harder than you think. And staying strong, that becomes a daily choice you'll have to make for yourself, even in a place where it's so easy not to. Regret 5, the loss of privacy and dignity. Before moving into a nursing home, I thought I had a pretty good idea of what to expect: smaller living quarters, more help with daily tasks, and maybe some compromises here and there. But what I didn't fully grasp until I was already living it was just how deeply I would feel the absence of privacy, and how that absence would slowly chip away at my sense of dignity. At home, I had my sanctuary. My bedroom was mine alone. I could close the door, sit in silence, move through my day however I chose, and do the simplest of things like dressing or bathing without an audience or assistance. It wasn't something I even thought to value, because it was just normal. That normal vanished quickly. From the day I arrived, I felt like my personal space was no longer truly mine. Staff came in and out regularly for check-ins, housekeeping, or medication. And though they meant well, there was little room to breathe, little space to simply be alone. Even routine tasks required coordination. Want to shower? You might have to wait until someone's free to assist you. Need the restroom? You press a call button, then wait sometimes longer than you're comfortable with until help arrives. It's a strange thing to find yourself asking permission for things you once did without a second thought. I remember one afternoon early on when I wanted nothing more than to sit quietly and read, but my roommate had the TV on, loud. Staff were coming in for routine checks, and it felt impossible to find stillness. That was another thing I hadn't expected: sharing your living space with a stranger. I was fortunate my roommate was kind, respectful, and easy to talk to, but not everyone is so lucky. I've heard stories of mismatched pairings, residents with vastly different habits, cognitive conditions, or hygiene routines. And when your living quarters are little more than a divided room, those differences matter. Sleep becomes difficult. peace becomes rare. And even when you try to personalize your side of the room, it never quite feels like your own. And then there are the subtler things, the quiet signals that tell you you're no longer seen as a full, independent adult. When staff knock but don't always wait before coming in, when someone talks to you like a patient instead of a person, when your schedule is no longer yours, and your preferences are squeezed into a daily routine built for efficiency, not individuality. These moments may seem small, but over time, they shape how you see yourself. You begin to feel less like you and more like someone who's simply being managed. Dignity, I've learned, isn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about being able to decide when to wake up, when to shower, or whether you feel like talking today or not. And when those little freedoms fade, something inside you shifts. If you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, take a moment to ask yourself, are you ready to surrender the privacy and autonomy you've spent your entire life protecting? Because once it slips away, reclaiming it isn't easy, and its absence is more noticeable than you might think. Regret 6, realizing it's harder to leave than you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, I told myself it was just a temporary stop, something to try for a while. I thought, if it doesn't feel right, I can always go back home. It sounded simple enough. But what I didn't understand then was how quickly the idea of going back starts to slip through your fingers, not because you don't want to, but because everything around you, and even inside you, begins to change. At first, I believed I was keeping my options open. My home was still there, waiting, but time passed. And the world I left behind didn't stay still. My house, once warm and familiar, sat empty. Keeping it maintained from a distance became harder than I thought. My children, with good intentions, began making decisions, selling furniture I wouldn't need anymore, talking about renting it out just for now. When I brought up the idea of returning, their faces tensed. Are you sure you can manage on your own? They asked gently. Wouldn't it be safer to stay here? Where there's help, I could hear the concern in their voices, but also the hesitation. The choice I thought would always be mine didn't feel so simple anymore. And then there was the deeper shift, the one happening inside my own body. I hadn't realized how much strength I'd lose by simply having less to do. No more cooking, no more errands, no stairs to climb or gardens to tend. It seemed like a blessing at first: rest, ease, relief. But that ease came at a cost. My legs, once sturdy, began to stiffen. My confidence waned. Tasks I used to do without thinking now felt daunting. And slowly, almost without noticing, I began to doubt whether I could truly live alone again. That fear, subtle and creeping, held me in place more firmly than any locked door ever could. I wasn't the only one. I met others who had walked through the doors of this place with the same thoughts I had just for now. They believed they'd stay a few weeks, maybe a couple of months. But seasons changed, and so did their circumstances. Some had homes they could no longer return to. Others had spent down their savings on care, making it impossible to afford living independently again. The truth no one talks about is this: once you move into a nursing home, it often becomes a one-way path, not because anyone forces you to stay, but because the world outside starts to slip away, piece by piece. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself this with honesty and care: are you ready for the possibility that leaving might not be as simple as you think? Because once you settle in, the ties that hold you there, whether they're physical, emotional, or financial, can become stronger than you ever imagined. It's not a decision to be feared, but it is one to be made with full awareness, because home, once left behind, is not always easy to return to. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't moving in, it's finding your way back out. Looking back, I don't regret growing older. Aging has brought me wisdom, perspective, and a deeper appreciation for the simple joys in life. But I do regret believing that moving into a nursing home was my only path forward. I entered with hope for comfort and safety. Yet slowly, I watched parts of myself fade: my independence, my privacy, my sense of purpose. That's not to say nursing homes are wrong for everyone. For some, they offer vital care and support. But for others, like me, the cost was greater than expected. If I had the chance to decide again, I would have explored more options, asked harder questions, and fought to preserve the life I had built on my own terms. So if you're facing this choice, Pause and ask, is this truly the right step or simply the most convenient? If something in this story resonated with you, comment "Still thinking" below. I'd love to know you're here. And if you'd like to hear more stories and insights like this, feel free to subscribe. You're always welcome here. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Keep holding on to what matters. And until next time, take care and never stop choosing the life that makes you feel most alive.